Namaskar dosto. Welcome to another exciting episode of our channel, where we dive deep into the history and strategy of the 1947-48 war. This is Chapter 15, Part 1, where we continue our detailed exploration of the battles that shaped the future of the subcontinent. If you're new here or just catching up, make sure to watch all the previous videos in this series to fully understand the context, the timeline, and most importantly, the operational art, OP art, relevance of each key action in the battle. We've worked hard to not only tell you about the events, but also explain the strategic thinking, the operational art that guided those decisions. It's not just history, dosto. It's about understanding how strategy and tactics evolve in critical moments. So, take notes, learn, and try to analyze the decisions like a true student of history and warfare. If you have any questions about the 1947-48 war or any specific battle, drop them in the comments. We are here to help you understand better. Now, let's dive into today's discussion. Let's move straight into the Gilgit conflict summary and its connection to the topographical significance. Topography and its strategic significance. Overview of the Northern Front. The region's rugged terrains, comprising Gurais, Skardu, Dras, Kargil, and Leh, played a pivotal role in shaping the military operations. With steep gradients, narrow gorges, and high-altitude plateaus, every maneuver required meticulous planning and execution. Karakoram Range. Strategic significance. This range served as a natural fortress, giving forces stationed on higher ground a commanding vantage point over their adversaries. Challenges. The unforgiving terrain severely restricted communication lines and troop movements, forcing military planners to prioritize precision logistics. Himalayan Range. Transportation and logistics. Key routes like Jojila and Burzil Pass were treacherous and became critical choke points in the conflict. Operational challenge. The movement of troops and supplies across these routes was not only arduous, but also a deciding factor in the success or failure of many operations. Deosai Plains. Strategic role. These open plains allowed for rapid troop maneuvers, making them a battlefield of opportunities and risks. However, the very openness that allowed mobility also made forces vulnerable to enemy fire. Environmental risks. The extreme cold and harsh conditions tested the resilience of troops and influenced the pace of operations. Now, let's dive into the arteries of the campaign, focusing on the crucial communication routes that defined operational success in the 1947-48 war. Importance of communication routes. Effective troop movements and the ability to sustain supply lines were the backbone of the campaign. The rugged topography made these routes even more critical, as they dictated not just the pace of operations, but also the ability to hold and defend key positions. Key routes and passes. Gilgit's Skardu Kargil Leh route. This route formed the primary lifeline of the region, connecting major strategic points and facilitating troop movements between the Northern Front and the rest of Kashmir. Its significance lay in its ability to ensure reinforcements and supplies reached the front line in a timely manner. Critical passes. Jojila played a crucial role in maintaining the connection between Srinagar and Leh despite its treacherous conditions. Burzil Pass and Kamri Pass. Vital for linking the Northern Front to the broader operational zone in Kashmir. These passes were often the focus of aggressive enemy actions due to their strategic importance. Valley tracks. Tracks along Shingo, Shigar, and Tilal valleys allowed for maneuverability, especially for flanking operations. These routes were critical in maintaining supply lines and executing tactical offensives. Strategic vulnerabilities. Srinagar Kargil supply line. This supply line, running parallel to the front line, was a lifeline for the forces. However, its proximity to the conflict zone made it highly vulnerable to ambushes, sabotage, and infiltration. Rugged terrain. The challenging geography provided natural cover for enemy forces to execute ambushes and disrupt operations. Protecting these routes required constant patrols and defensive planning. Now we will discuss advantages for the aggressor. Dosto, the Northern Front's unique geography and logistical vulnerabilities offered several advantages to attackers with the initiative. These factors often allowed aggressors to exploit natural and operational weaknesses to gain strategic leverage. Geographical advantage. The rugged terrain, while challenging, created opportunities for attackers who could leverage the high ground and narrow passes to dictate the flow of battle. Attackers with local knowledge of the topography could use hidden valleys and mountain trails to launch surprise offensives and outmaneuver defenders. Strategic outflanking. The Gilgit to Gurais baseline provided an effective platform for attackers to execute outflanking maneuvers. This positioning allowed aggressors to isolate and disrupt Skardu's supply lines, cutting off reinforcements and creating significant pressure on defenders stationed in the region. Parallel supply lines. The close proximity of main communication routes to the front line was a double-edged sword. While vital for defensive logistics, these routes became prime targets for attackers. By disrupting these supply lines, aggressors could isolate key defensive positions, forcing defenders into a reactive posture. Let's see some operational takeaways. Dosto. The 1947-48 conflict provided key lessons on the interplay of geography, strategy, and operational execution. These insights remain relevant for understanding military campaigns in challenging terrains. 1. Exploitation of terrain. Success hinged on leveraging natural barriers and key passes for both offense and defense. While defenders often relied on the difficult terrain to stall advances, attackers with the initiative exploited rugged landscapes and hidden trails for infiltration and surprise maneuvers. 2. Logistics and mobility. Control over key routes, such as the Indus Valley and critical passes like Jojila, was essential for maintaining supply lines and reinforcements. The ability to sustain operations in such remote and hostile environments often decided the outcome of engagements. 3. Initiative and flexibility. Attackers with superior planning and adaptability leveraged the terrain's vulnerabilities, executing strategic outflanking and disrupting supply chains. The ability to remain flexible in the face of challenging logistics and terrain shifts was a hallmark of successful operations. When viewed through the lens of operational art, OP art, the 1947-48 war reveals the intricate interplay between geography, strategy, and logistics, shaping the campaign's outcomes. The Prussian-German approach to OP art, which highlights the use of geography as a strategic tool, is evident in how the terrain of the Northern Front was leveraged. Natural barriers like the Karakoram and Himalayas provided defenders with strategic depth and opportunities to anchor their positions. At the same time, choke points such as Jojila served as critical control nodes, dictating the tempo of operations. These natural features became force multipliers, allowing limited forces to delay or deny enemy advances while conserving strength for counteroffensives. The conflict also aligns with Soviet OP art, particularly in its emphasis on deep operations and multi-axis offensives. The movement from Gilgit to Gurais, aimed at outflanking defenders and severing their supply lines, reflects the Soviet principle of operational depth. By targeting logistical and defensive vulnerabilities, the aggressors sought to disrupt the coherence of enemy forces, achieving strategic effects through operational maneuver. This approach highlights how exploiting terrain and initiating multi-directional thrusts can force defenders into reactive and disorganized positions. From the perspective of Israeli operational art, flexibility and adaptation to terrain stand out as critical elements. In regions like the Deosai Plains, the ability to adjust tactics to high-altitude, open environments was paramount. Rapidly adapting to the terrain's opportunities and constraints allowed forces to exploit mobility while mitigating exposure to enemy fire. This adaptability underscores the importance of tailoring operational plans to dynamic environmental conditions, a principle central to Israeli military philosophy. Finally, the British school of OP art, particularly shaped by their experiences on the northwest frontier, resonates in the logistical challenges faced during the conflict. Rugged terrains, limited infrastructure, and the vulnerability of supply routes, such as those linking Jojila to the Indus Valley, required meticulous planning and resource allocation. The successful management of these supply lines was not merely a tactical concern but a strategic necessity, ensuring sustained operations and reinforcing the importance of logistics within operational planning. Let's move on and look at the fall of Gilgit, topography, and its impact on operations. The geography of Gilgit played a critical role in shaping the events. Remote and rugged terrain, the region's steep mountains and narrow gorges made it difficult for reinforcements to reach Gilgit in time. The isolation of this high-altitude frontier created logistical challenges for the Maharaja's administration. Communication routes, critical supply lines from Srinagar to Gilgit passed through Banji and Asta, which were vulnerable to disruption. The lack of reliable communication and transportation further weakened Brigadier Ghansar Singh's position. Next, we will talk about political and communal undercurrents. The political situation in the autumn of 1947 was volatile. Communal riots, the broader unrest in Punjab and Jammu and Kashmir inflamed tensions in the predominantly Muslim region of Gilgit. Pro-Pakistan sentiment, local communities, including the Gilgit Scouts, leaned heavily toward Pakistan. This sentiment was fueled by hostility toward the Dogra rule and the presence of pro-Pakistan British officers like Major Brown. State Troops Division, the composition of 6 J&K infantry, half Sikhs, half Muslims, created internal divisions. While SIP troops were inexperienced, the Muslim troops, deeply affected by communal violence in Punjab, became openly hostile. Next is leadership and governance challenges. The fall of Gilgit also highlights administrative missteps and operational vulnerabilities. Weak administration. Brigadier Ghansar Singh, despite his efforts, faced several obstacles. He lacked financial control and authority to win local support. The telegraph and wireless systems were controlled by British and Muslim operators, cutting off communication with Srinagar. Divided command. Lieutenant Colonel Abdul Majid Khan's open opposition to the Sikh troops undermined the unity of 6 J&K infantry. Pro-Pakistan treachery. The Gilgit Scouts, led by British officers Major Brown and Captain Matheson, orchestrated the coup, exploiting local dissatisfaction and communal tensions. Moving next, let's check out sequence of events leading to the fall of Gilgit. The events unfolded rapidly in late October 1947, 31st October to 1st November. Mutiny at the governor's house. Around 100 Gilgit Scouts, led by Major Brown, surrounded Brigadier Ghansar Singh's residence and demanded his surrender. Despite his initial resistance, lack of reinforcements forced him to capitulate. Local protests. Villagers' protests against the Scouts' actions likely saved the lives of the governor and other non-Muslims. November 1st to 3rd. Massacre at Jangalot. The Sikh garrison at Jangalot was annihilated in a treacherous attack by Muslim troops and Scouts. Collapse at Banji. The remaining SIP troops at Banji were scattered and hunted down, unable to escape due to blockades by the Scouts under Captain Matheson. Formation of provisional government. Major Brown declared a provisional government, but it was controlled entirely by the conspirators, with no local representation. On 3rd November 1947, Brown hoisted the Pakistani flag at Gilgit. Strategic implications. The loss of Gilgit had far-reaching consequences for the Jammu and Kashmir conflict. Control of Northern Front. Pakistan's occupation of Gilgit allowed them to launch offensives toward Gurais and Skardu, further destabilizing the region. Communication and supply lines. The fall of Gilgit cut off vital supply routes, isolating Leh and Skardu, and compromising the defense of Ladakh. No Azad Kashmir government. The swift handover of administration to Pakistan's political agent, Sardar Muhammad Alam, signaled the direct integration of Gilgit into Pakistan undermining the idea of an independent Azad Kashmir. Moving further ahead, let's see few lessons from the fall of Gilgit. 1. Terrain and logistics. Control over high-altitude supply routes is paramount in mountain warfare. Gilgit's isolation left it vulnerable to internal dissent and external aggression. 2. Unified command. Divided loyalties within forces, as seen in 6th J&K Infantry and the Scouts, can lead to catastrophic failure. The operations around Gilgit during the 1947-48 war, when viewed through the lens of operational art, OP art, showcase parallels with key principles and doctrines of historical operational strategies. Each provides insights into how the challenges and adaptations in this theatre align with broader concepts in operational warfare. 1. Napoleon and operational warfare. Logistical challenges. The logistical and communication difficulties faced in Gilgit reflect Napoleon's principle that an army marches on its stomach, emphasizing the importance of maneuverability and supply lines in sustaining operations. 2. Tsarist and Soviet operational art, deep operations. The use of Gilgit Scouts and the exploitation of internal divisions align with Soviet principles of deep operations. The Soviets emphasized attacking not just the front lines, but also disrupting enemy cohesion through penetration and exploitation of weaknesses. 3. Israeli operational art, flexibility and decisive action. The Gilgit Scouts' attacks and the establishment of a provisional government showcase operational adaptability akin to Israeli principles of rapid decision-making and decisive strikes. 4. British operational art, administrative weaknesses. The administrative weaknesses and poor communication in Gilgit resonate with the challenges faced by British colonial forces in managing far-flung territories like the Northwest frontier. Moving on, let's dive into the story of initial stability and collapse at Gilgit, a critical chapter in the 1947-48 conflict. This part reveals how initial efforts to maintain stability unraveled into a series of betrayals and strategic setbacks for India. Through this lens, we'll understand how governance, geography, and operational challenges played their roles. Stabilization efforts. Brigadier Ghansar Singh made early attempts to restore governance in Gilgit. Despite the harsh terrain and limited resources, he worked to engage with local leaders and maintain order. This was no easy task. Imagine trying to lead in a remote, high-altitude outpost with opposition brewing all around. Challenges. The situation in Gilgit was complicated by the presence of pro-Pakistan elements within the Gilgit Scouts, the very forces meant to defend the region. Combined with the rugged terrain, which hampered logistics and reinforcements, Singh faced an uphill battle to stabilize the area. It's a classic example of how internal and external pressures can converge to destabilize a region. Revolt and betrayal. Here's where things took a dark turn. A mutiny erupted within Gilgit, led by Major Brown and Sub-Major Babar Khan, both of whom sided with Pakistan. This betrayal crippled the administration, and things only got worse with the massacre at Banji, where Indian troops were caught in a treacherous attack. These events sealed Gilgit's fate, ensuring that the region slipped out of India's control. Dosto. Following these events, a provisional government was swiftly established to consolidate Pakistan's control over Gilgit. This wasn't just a loss of territory, it was a strategic blow for India. Gilgit's fall created a domino effect, allowing Pakistani forces to launch offensives toward Gurais and Skardu, shifting the momentum of the conflict. When viewed through the framework of operational art, OP art, the events at Gilgit reflect key principles from military doctrines across history. The collapse of stability and its aftermath highlight critical operational lessons in command, cohesion, and strategic control. 1. Prussian-German operational art. A cornerstone of Prussian-German OP art is the principle of unity of command, emphasizing the need for cohesive leadership to maintain operational effectiveness. The divided loyalties within the Gilgit Scouts, with pro-Pakistan elements undermining Brigadier Ghansar Singh's authority, illustrate the dangers of internal discord. 2. Soviet operational art, exploitation of internal divisions. Soviet OP art focuses on exploiting internal divisions to destabilize the enemy and consolidate strategic gains. Pakistan's ability to capitalize on the mutiny within the Gilgit Scouts and the subsequent massacre at Bunji aligns with Soviet principles. The swift establishment of a provisional government post-mutiny reflects the Soviet doctrine of consolidating control rapidly to secure operational depth and prevent counteraction by adversaries. 3. The rise and fall of Israeli operational art, decisive actions and surprise. Israeli OP art is characterized by rapid, decisive actions and the element of surprise to achieve strategic results. The mutiny at Gilgit and the massacre at Bunji reflect these principles, where unexpected, coordinated actions dismantled the Indian administration's control in the region. 4. Napoleon and the dawn of operational warfare, strategic terrain and disunity. Napoleon's operational principles emphasize the importance of key terrain and the inherent risks posed by disunity within forces. Gilgit's strategic location as a critical outpost mirrors Napoleon's recognition of terrain as a decisive factor in campaigns. Let's talk about how geography and strategy came together during the early conflicts in Jammu and Kashmir, focusing on Gurais, Skardu, Dras, and Kargil, regions that became the battlegrounds of tactics and survival. Starting with Gurais, this area isn't just another scenic spot in the Himalayas. It's surrounded by the rugged Karakoram range, which acted as a natural barrier. Sounds great, right? But here's the catch. While it slowed down enemy movement, it also complicated troop movement and supply chains for India. When Pakistan lost Gilgit, they quickly shifted their attention to Gurais, trying to expand their northern foothold. In a way, they were exploiting geography to offset their losses, classic tactical maneuvering. Now, moving on to Skardu, the next big flashpoint. With Gilgit secured, Pakistan made a hard push for Skardu. And why wouldn't they? It was a critical strategic objective in the north. Indian troops stationed there, however, weren't just sitting ducks. They took advantage of the high-altitude terrain, using the Karakoram heights to slow down the Pakistani advance. Imagine trying to fight a battle where every step is a climb and every move is slowed by thin air. Tough for both sides. But India held its ground. Skardu became a testament to how terrain can shape the tempo of operations. Finally, we arrive at the all-important regions of Dras and Kargil, the literal gateways to Ladakh. These areas weren't just any random spots on the map. They were critical vantage points and military hubs. Controlling them meant controlling the routes into Ladakh, and for Pakistan, this was an opportunity to shift the balance in their favor. But here's the thing, the Karakoram terrain wasn't doing either side any favors. Logistical difficulties slowed down operations for everyone involved, turning the battle into a war of endurance. Pakistani control of parts of this region posed a serious threat to India's hold over Ladakh, which would have been disastrous for the strategic stability of the region. In short, these battles were more than just firefights. They were a chess game played across some of the harshest terrains on the planet. Geography was both an ally and an enemy, shaping strategies, slowing down operations, and ultimately defining the outcomes. And for those of you preparing for exams, remember this. These regions show how topography and strategy intersect, and why map is just as important as the weapons you carry. Now let's talk about the Deosai Plains, a place that's as breathtaking as it is brutal, and as strategic as it is sensitive. Imagine a massive high-altitude plateau, sitting at over 13,000 feet, right in the middle of a conflict zone between India and Pakistan. On one hand, the Deosai Plains were a critical link for troop movements and logistics, a sort of open highway in the sky. Control over this area meant better supply chains, faster troop deployment, and, most importantly, a commanding position in the broader conflict. But here's the catch. High-altitude warfare isn't just tough on soldiers. it's tough on the environment too. Which brings me to the environmental impact, something that often gets overlooked in discussions about strategy. The Deosai Plains, being a fragile ecosystem, suffered heavily due to military activities. Troop movements, heavy equipment, and prolonged conflict caused significant ecological damage. Think about it. A place that's home to snow leopards, Himalayan brown bears, and rare vegetation suddenly becomes a war zone. The environmental cost of conflict here wasn't just collateral damage. It was a permanent scar on a unique natural habitat. And yet, we can't ignore the strategic importance of this region. Whoever controlled the Deosai Plains gained a significant advantage, not just geographically but psychologically. This wasn't just about holding land. It was about sending a message of dominance in one of the most challenging terrains in the world. The plateau acted like a chessboard, where every move could determine the outcome of the broader conflict. In the end, the Deosai Plains highlight a crucial lesson. Wars aren't just fought on battlefields. They leave a mark on nature too. While we study the strategic moves made here, it's equally important to remember the cost paid by the environment. So, whether you're a defense strategist or an environmentalist, the Deosai Plains stand as a stark reminder of the fine line between strategy and sustainability. Alright, dosto, let's wrap this up by looking at the key lessons India learned from the challenges in this conflict, particularly from Pakistan's successes in places like Gilgit and the Deosai Plains. These aren't just lessons from history, they're lessons that continue to shape how India approaches high-altitude warfare today. First, let's talk about terrain adaptation. One thing Pakistan got right was its ability to use the Karakoram terrain to its advantage. Their troops were well prepared to operate in high-altitude regions, leveraging the natural obstacles and challenges of the area. For India, this was a wake-up call. High-altitude warfare requires specialized training, equipment, and logistics. It's not just about fighting the enemy, it's about surviving the terrain. This is a lesson India took seriously, and it's why today we have some of the world's best-trained mountain troops, like the Indian Army's High-Altitude Warfare School, HOS, in Gulmarg. Second, there's the importance of strategic outposts. Losing critical areas like Gilgit and Deosai Plains highlighted a harsh truth. Control over high-altitude regions isn't just about geography, it's about strategy. These areas serve as natural choke points and logistical hubs, and losing them gives the enemy a significant advantage. It's why India's focus on maintaining strongholds like Siachen Glacier in later years became non-negotiable. Control over these regions doesn't just protect territory. It ensures dominance over the supply routes and strategic positions that could tip the balance in future conflicts. So, what's the big takeaway here? High-altitude regions are the battlegrounds of endurance and strategy. For India, these lessons weren't just about the past, they've shaped the present. Today, every move in places like Ladakh, Kargil, and beyond is informed by what happened back in 1947 to 48. Alright, let's connect the dots between the military significance of the Deosai Plains and the broader concepts of operational art, OP art, a framework that combines strategy and tactics to win wars. What's fascinating here is how the events in the northern frontiers of India and Pakistan mirror the lessons of military geniuses like Napoleon, the Prussian Germans, and even modern Israeli strategy. Let's break it down. 1. Prussian-German operational art. The Prussian Germans were the original pioneers of operational warfare, and their principle of securing critical geography directly applies here. The Deosai Plains and high-altitude regions like Gilgit serve as logistical and strategic choke points, just like the terrain the Germans prioritized during their campaigns. The loss of Gilgit to Pakistan exposes the same vulnerability the Germans warned about, failing to defend key supply lines and transport hubs. Operational art teaches us that if you lose the geography, you lose the war's momentum. For India, the lesson was clear: protect critical terrain at all costs. 2. The rise and fall of Israeli operational art. Now, if we look at Pakistan's high-altitude strategy, it aligns with modern Israeli tactics. Just like Israel has consistently used its challenging terrain to its advantage, whether it's the Sinai or the Golan Heights, Pakistan used the Karakoram terrain as a natural ally in its campaigns. Their adaptability in the harsh conditions of the Deosai Plains reflects a similar approach. Focus on defending high-value territories while leveraging the natural environment to counterbalance the enemy's advantages. For India, this was a lesson in terrain adaptability, an area where our modern troops have now excelled. 3. Napoleon and the dawn of operational warfare. Finally, let's talk about Napoleon, the man who practically invented the idea of combining strategy, logistics, and tactics into a cohesive system. The struggle for control of the Deosai Plains echoes Napoleon's principles of operational warfare: use geography as a force multiplier, adapt to the terrain, and maintain robust supply lines to ensure dominance. The Deosai region, with its high altitude and unforgiving terrain, is a perfect example of how controlling geography can dictate the outcome of a conflict. Napoleon would have said, "Whoever commands the Deosai commands the northern frontiers." That's a wrap on our discussion about the Chamb area, Deosai Plains, and the lessons from 1947 to 48. From strategic geography to the impact of operational art, we've seen how history shapes strategy. If you found this helpful, like the video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more exam-relevant content. Drop a comment with your thoughts or topics you'd like covered next. Till then, stay strategic and keep learning. Jai Hind.